There's no such thing as an anti-war film. These are the words of François Truffaut, and there are different ways to interpret this remark, but it's widely agreed that Truffaut was suggesting that movies will inevitably glorify combat when they portray the adventure and thrill of conflict. When Truffaut made this comment, he was referring to Stanley Kubrick's 1957 film, Paths of Glory, which is considered by many as the greatest anti-war film ever made. But in the same interview, Truffaut continues this remark. I find that violence is very ambiguous in movies. For example, some films claim to be anti-war, but I don't think I've really seen an anti-war film. Every film about war ends up being pro-war. I love a lot of the films that Truffaut is talking about. But the strange thing is, I don't entirely disagree with what Truffaut is saying. If you look at the science behind war movies and the effect they have on our brain, Truffaut is actually right in a lot of ways. Regardless of genre or subject matter, at their core, all films are created as a form of entertainment, and our minds are consciously aware of that, but it still reacts. In a study conducted at Washington University regarding the psychology of movies, Professor Jeff Zaks states, "You know there is nothing up there on the screen that can touch you or hurt you or pull you out of your chair, but we react as if they can." This is where neurocinematics comes into the equation. Neurocinematics is an area of research that explores the impact of film on the human brain, combining insights from neuroscience, psychology, and film studies. A leader in this field of research is Yuri Hassan, whose work utilizes MRI scans to measure the brain activity of a subject whilst they view a movie. Hassan's studies reveal that certain films can exert considerable control over brain activity, with the degree of influence varying based on the film's content, editing, and directing style, meaning that directors can literally influence how our brain is working through their filmmaking choices. Filmmaking is an art form that literally lives and dies through its choices. It's controlled entirely by the intent of the filmmakers. Everything that's put on screen is put there intentionally, and it's done so with the intent of creating an emotional response. Right now you may be freely looking around your room, out the window, or at your coffee cup on your desk, but in cinema you can't do this. Everything we see is curated by a director. Every gunshot, every explosion, every drop of blood, and every tear is there because it was put there intentionally to elicit a response. And this is where we begin to enter a paradox. Because in the case of most anti-war films, the emotion that our brains respond with is adrenaline. The paradoxical effect anti-war films have on the human brain, particularly through the elicitation of adrenaline, underscores a complex psychological phenomenon. It's a strange thing, because even though these films aim to depict the horrors and futility of war, their intense and often graphic portrayals can inadvertently trigger the body's adrenaline response. This response, characterized by heightened physical and mental alertness, is not inherently negative. The rush of adrenaline, therefore, transforms a viewing experience into one of excitement and heightened engagement, regardless of a film's heavy subject matter. Consequently, an intended anti-war message may be overshadowed by the viewer's physiological and emotional response, illustrating the intricate interplay between film content, brain chemistry, and viewer perception. And I think there's a lot of films that claim to be anti-war that really fall victim to this. In fact, some of these films I really love. It saddens me to say it, but films like Saving Private Ryan, Full Metal Jacket, Apocalypse Now, Paths of Glory, and Dunkirk all lose their impact as anti-war films because fundamentally, they glorify it.
Now, let me just pause because I do think Francis Ford Coppola, it's important to listen to his remarks on Apocalypse Now because he himself has now said that Apocalypse Now is not an anti-war film. So here's what he said. Coppola hesitates to call the film anti-war. No one wants to make a pro-war film. Everyone wants to make an anti-war film. Unless you're like, I don't know, Top Gun. But an anti-war film, I always thought, should be like Kon Ichikawa's 1956 post-Second World War drama, The Burmese Harp. Something filled with love and peace and tranquility and happiness. It shouldn't have scenes of violence. It shouldn't have sequences of violence that inspire a lust for violence. Apocalypse Now has stirring scenes of helicopters attacking innocent people. That's not anti-war. He pitches his own alternative by way of counterexample. I always thought the perfect anti-war film would be a story in Iraq about a family who were going to have their daughter be married and different relatives were going to come to the wedding. The people managed to come. Maybe there'd be some dangers, but no one would get blown up. Nobody would get hurt. They would dance at the wedding. That would be an anti-war film. An anti-war film cannot glorify war, and Apocalypse Now arguably does. Certain sequences have been used to rev up people to be warlike. So I think that this is a really interesting point, because basically what he's saying is a true anti-war film would be showing you the people who have been, the targets of war crimes and violence from the biggest military in the world, the American military, and showing them as human beings, like having a wedding, enjoying like their lives, and showing this beautiful, peaceful existence of, these are human beings who are who are not deserving of being blown up and massacred. So I think that's an interesting point there. And it doesn't need to glorify it to desensitize you to scenes of violence and human suffering. Our city died of guns, violence, and war is deadened our response to real war and conflict. Well, as I said before, like, I think the inherent problem with anti-war, with war movies, is that cinema is not an adequate medium. Oops. What did I just do? Cinema is not an adequate medium to convey the horrors of war, the horrors of conflict, to in its totality. It's kind of like how the Holocaust is so uniquely horrifying that narrative cinema ultimately will never be able to show the full extent of the horrors of the Holocaust. And so it is a huge challenge for filmmakers when they have chosen to depict the events of a war or a conflict because of the problem that is inherent to the medium that they are working in. And as I said, then you throw in like commercial viability, you throw in the the kind of like narrative focus of the story in the film, and what often results is a war film that shows you, yeah, war is really brutal, but doesn't necessarily hit home the message that we should all be anti-war, that we should all be, that war is never good, that war is never, ever, ever good. Where would a movie like Starship Troopers fall into this? I've actually not ever seen Starship Troopers, so I can't answer that, because without the context, for most people at the surface level, it'll be a movie that glamorizes war when it's not actually the intention. Yeah, and to be clear, this is not about like this is not about like guilt tripping us, and whenever we examine the role of film and its effects on its effects on our society and on our world, and what our role is as a consumer of a consumer of films. Oh, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Little steak, salad,
Oh,
chimichurri.
that looks amazing. Thank you very much. I think what this is about is just like always questioning what the intentions are, right? Always looking at the effects that a film has, whether intentional or not. And I said before, but the viewer is the last author of the film. The last and honestly, the most important, arguably, when it comes to thank you. When it comes to the effect and the message of the film. And it depends on your individual sensibilities, it depends on your beliefs, it depends on your interpretation of what is being presented to you. And it's why, like, a film like Apocalypse Now, even though it is so brutal and depicts the depicts the like mental and physical anguish of the soldiers who were fighting in Vietnam, it also unintentionally had the effect of like inspiring people who saw that film, making them feel like, man, the camaraderie here, man, the purpose here is something that is a good thing, is a positive thing. People do not often have that analytic thought to see the fiction in these movies, in my opinion. Right, like they get swept up in the music, in the they get swept up in like the cinematic effects of the film, and so yeah, you might understand like, oh man, this is really violent and this is really brutal, and yet you still ultimately do not have this reckoning with with the idea of war in the first place, for it truly to have the effect of being an anti-war film. Like, let me just, for example,
Put on War off, sing it loud.
and here's the thing, okay? So, whoever the protagonist of the film is, that's whose perspective that we get. And we are naturally inclined to empathize with whoever's perspective we are receiving. And when war films are so often from the perspective of American soldiers, then that is who we are ultimately empathizing with. That's who's like That's who we are seeing as the, you know, the good guys, even if it's not a good guys, like even if it's not like we look at something as simple as the good guys versus the bad guys. We're not saying like, oh, American soldiers good guys, Vietnamese soldiers bad guys, but it's still the way that the story is presented, the emotional experience that we're having is that we are with our protagonists, and our protagonists are the American soldiers. Have you seen Born on the 4th of July? Yeah. Right? And like the sweeping shots, and yeah, it's fucking violent and it's sad, but it's still so cinematic, right? And I say again, this is not to make you feel guilty and be like, oh no, but I love Platoon. Oh no, I love Apocalypse Now. Oh no, um I love Saving Private Ryan. Yeah, I love those movies too, and um I work to like see the moments that the just work to separate out when something is being romanticized, when something is propaganda, and understanding like why that is. And I think you can love those movies and understand that those films are not necessarily intrinsically sending the message that war should not ever happen.
Let's take a look at Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, for example. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite films, and for the longest time, I saw Full Metal Jacket as the embodiment of the anti-war genre, but it really isn't. The dehumanizing first and second halves of Full Metal Jacket definitely don't intend to paint a flattering picture of military life.
Thank you.
Yet, R. Lee Ermey's abusive drill sergeant has become somewhat of a folk hero, and the 1,000-yard stare has come to signify badassery, rather than an unwashable stain on one's soul. The action meant to simulate the dread and misery of war instead becomes riveting and addictive. So if none of these films are anti-war films, then what is? In 1998, whilst promoting his film Saving Private Ryan, Steven Spielberg took opposition to Truffaut's comments. In fact, he stated the complete opposite. Any war movie, good or bad, is an anti-war movie. I don't think what Spielberg is saying here is right, but I think to disprove Truffaut's comments, we need to look at what exactly defines an anti-war film. And to do that, let's take a look at what many people consider the definitive anti-war film. Elem Klimov's Come and See. The film throws us into the abyss of World War II through the eyes of Floria, a Belarusian teenager eager to join the fight against the Nazis. But Come and See transcends the genre by wielding its visceral violence not for entertainment, but as a searing indictment of war's inhumanity. The film's brutality is unrelenting. Klimov doesn't shy away from depicting the unimaginable. Burning villages, mass executions, and the psychological torment inflicted on civilians are shown with a horrifying intimacy. This unflinching portrayal is born from Klimov's personal experiences. Klimov is a survivor of the Battle of Stalingrad. As a child, he and his family escaped the city by crossing the Volga in a makeshift raft. Having seen the devastation of war firsthand, he refused to sanitize it for the screen. Come and See doesn't portray war as the grand conquest for a just cause. It's about the erosion of innocence. Floria, initially wide-eyed with naive patriotism, transforms into a hollow shell. His youthful spirit is completely devoured by the carnage around him. This is where Come and See's anti-war message transcends other films.
Like this film This film takes a lot of care to avoid any sensationalizing. And to do so, it does not depict any scenes of battle, but instead shows you the aftermath, shows you the effect that violence has on the characters in the film. And there is like one really, I mean, the whole film is hellish, but there is a particularly nightmarish part of the film where you come to realize that an entire village was murdered and their bodies were stacked against a house like they were animals, and like they were animals that had been slaughtered. And the shot only lasts very briefly, okay? And that is intentional. It is a brief shot because it doesn't want to linger on that violence. It doesn't want to sensationalize it at all, because the purpose is the effect that it has on the characters rather than the act itself. And so the audience imagining, you know, the details of that massacre and you know, by only briefly showing the dead bodies, like, that is again more terrifying than anything the filmmaker could depict on screen. It kind of goes back to the whole like don't show the monster type thing.
It doesn't offer catharsis through victory or the comfort of clear heroes and villains. Here, everyone is a victim caught in a maelstrom of violence. The film forces us to confront the true cost of war, not just in the lives that have been lost, but in the fracturing of humanity itself. This is why I think Come and See serves as a perfect benchmark for creating a criteria that defines whether a film is truly anti-war. So here's my criteria. Number 1, the film should avoid portraying war as a noble or heroic endeavor. Instead, it should focus on the senselessness and moral ambiguity of conflict. Number 2, the film must depict the widespread devastation caused by war, including the impact on civilians, soldiers, and the environment. Number 3, the film should be informed.
And I think in particular films about World War II, because of the evil of Hitler, this is in particular the first criterion of not glorifying war as a conquest of good over evil. It is very difficult because even those of us who understand how, like, so many of the wars that America is involved in have been nothing but our own greed and own brutal foreign policy, right? Like, we are able it's very good. Yes, thank you. We are able to apply a critical lens to Vietnam, to Korea, to Iraq and Afghanistan. But with World War II, it's, well, Hitler was so evil and he had murdered, he had committed a genocide against Jewish people, and he was going to take over the world. And so the good guys had to fight the bad guys. And what that does is, are you okay?
Yeah, you left a lot of water out here.
No, I didn't leave any water. What happened?
I slipped.
Oh no. Wait, I didn't put any water down. Where the?
It's okay.
No, where is that from?
I don't know.
Oh, you know what? It's probably from the fucking dishwasher.
I slipped and hurt my ribs.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I think I'm alright.
Babe, I promise I did not put water on the ground.
It's okay.
Oh my god. Jesus. Yeah, he goes, yeah, you put water on the ground and I fell. I said, I did not put water on the ground. Why would I put water on the ground? He's been doing boxing, so his whole body hurts. And I guess he slipped in the kitchen. And I was like, okay, I'm so sorry you're hurt, but I did not put water on the ground. Why would I do that? Why would I put water on the ground? Yeah, maybe he didn't see the entrance to the wine cellar. Maybe that's what it was. Okay, anyway. One day I will have a stream room that's far from any distractions, so I can remember what I was talking about. So, what I was saying was World War II. Yes, World War II seems to be, in particular, a subgenre of war films where it is a challenge to take away from it that war is still bad, right? That like war is in no circumstances should there be any like glory attached to it. Ahem. Because to be truly anti-war is to do no glorification of any conflict whatsoever, and to do no to not treat it as good versus evil, which in effect will have glorified violence and war.
Formed by the personal experiences of those who have lived through war, providing an authentic and unflinching perspective. And off the top of my head, I can only think of two other films that conform to this. Firstly is Larissa Shepitko's...
Also, yes, I understand that it is not the case that America got involved in the war because they cared so much about Jewish people. Like, to be clear about that. But I just mean when it comes to, like, I think even those who are, very condemning of the Vietnam War, Korean War, wars in the Middle East, like, etc., right? There is this nostalgia and this kind of reverence for World War II because that seemed to be the ultimate good versus evil, right? Because Hitler was such a big bad, and it was a war to stop Hitler.
Was The Ascent, based on a novel by Belarusian writer Vasyl Bykov. The film is set during World War II and follows two Soviet partisans as they struggle to survive whilst evading Nazi capture. The Ascent portrays the internal and external struggles of its characters without resorting to heroic tropes. The film's focus is on the moral dilemmas faced by the protagonists, highlighting the complexity and futility of their situation. The film vividly depicts the physical and psychological toll of war, with its harsh, snow-covered landscape serving as a powerful metaphor for the desolation and despair spread by conflict. Larissa Shepitko's father was a high-ranking officer in the military. When talking about her childhood, this is what she had to say. "My father fought all through the war. To me, the war was one of the most powerful early impressions. I remember feeling
Schindler's
upset,
List, directed
the
by
family separated.
Spielberg. Yep.
I remember hunger and how our mother and us were evacuated. The impression of a global calamity certainly left an indelible mark on my mind." The next film that conforms to this criteria is Masaki Kobayashi's Human Condition trilogy. Masaki Kobayashi's Human Condition trilogy is a sprawling exploration of the human cost of war. The trilogy follows Kaji, a pacifist and socialist, as he navigates the horrors of World War II and its aftermath. The trilogy presents a stark and unflinching portrayal of the brutality and inhumanity of war. Kaji's journey is one of moral and ethical struggle, not of heroism or glory. The trilogy covers a vast range of experiences, from the labor camps to the battlefield, providing a comprehensive view of war's devastation, depicting the suffering of soldiers, prisoners, and civilians alike. Kobayashi's own experiences as a soldier who refused to fight and was subsequently imprisoned deeply influenced his work. His personal commitment to pacifism and his first-hand knowledge of war's horrors are glaringly evident throughout the trilogy. While Truffaut's assertion that there's no such thing as an anti-war film holds weight in many cases, films like Come and See, The Ascent, and the Human Condition trilogy completely challenge this notion. They demonstrate that it is possible to create a cinematic experience that truly conveys the horrors of war without succumbing to the allure of spectacle. However, these films are extremely rare and require a delicate balance to avoid the pitfalls that Truffaut was warning against. Ultimately, the power of these films lies in their ability to make us pause and reflect more deeply on war's horrific nature and the
And
senselessness
the
of.
thing is like those films tend to be less commercial, right? For the people who are watching or have seen Come and See or the other ones that he mentioned, their sensibilities are probably already in line with what the intention of the filmmaker is. And, you know, Come and See, like there is no reprieve there. But it's also not like sensationalist suffering. It's not like we're just going to show you these cinematic scenes of brutality. It's very it's very pared down, and it's just incredibly bleak, and it's very I don't know, the focus very much so is on not depicting the action sequences, the violent action sequences, but the toll that it has on the characters in the film. It's not a coincidence all the directors of those anti-war films experience war firsthand. Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Of it all, and how dangerous it actually is to glorify it. Thanks for watching the video.
I would not say Dunkirk is an anti-war film. So the point that I've been trying to make is that, of course, any war film is going to show you how brutal war is, right? But it's not a matter of like, are you seeing how violent war is? It's about, is any of this conflict, is any of this soldier camaraderie, is any of this film inherently glorifying the conflict, even if that's not what like the filmmaker's trying to do?